So perfectly working markets don't necessarily give you the right thing. You don't just distribute wealth if you don't like the way markets work. That's not the way the power system works. Disparate time horizons, delays in recognizing limits to growth, so that by the time you recognize the problem, it's either impossible or very expensive to prevent it. Inappropriate production and consumption patterns. On the previous slide, Galbraith said, you know, supply and demand are not independent. There's producer-created demand. Now, I would say if you want to go away from the talk believing anything, you should believe the following. The private sector should not be allowed to produce anything it wants. I'll say it again. The private sector should not be allowed to produce anything it wants, because what they are taking us down is a garden path of disaster, as was indicated in the prior talk. The failure to engage individuals in the society to realize their human potential, which results not only in economic disparities, but social exclusion of whole groups, is a major problem. I'll reference immigration. I'll reference Sarkozy's deportation of the Roma. I mean, this problem is not a small problem. The anti-immigrant animus that exists in the United States, forgetting that it was a country built on immigrants. And one which I didn't add until 5 years ago, corruption, the abuse of market power, and inadequate law. I mean, if you don't take care of those problems, and by corruption, I don't mean just the hand in the till. I mean the corruption of the social contract. Government has a role. And I have to tell you, I'm a Rawlsian. That is, I believe the things that governments should do is to advantage the least advantaged, not trickle down. I can tell you, I believe in trickle down. When I take my dog out in the morning and it lifts its leg against a tree, that's trickle down. But trickle down economics does not, has not, and will not work. If you don't take care of the bottom billion in the world, you are going to have to either put iron gates around your houses, or you're going to have guns, which are pretty damn strong. Now, the issue of environment, economy, and work are all related. And the things that drive these corners of the triangle and the relationships between them are both technological change, where you can get some win-win situations, but also globalization. Now, globalization has its pluses, has its minuses. But if we don't begin to build institutions that handle what we innovate and how we arrange, you know, the political spectrum, then we're not going to be able, we're going to have trading off one against the other. For example, right now in the US, have a terrific jobs problem. Obama's under enormous pressure to do something, which he hasn't done yet, about the jobs. You can lay tar down to fix the potholes in the streets. That creates quite an environmental footprint. So is the choice between just creating more stuff in order to get people with purchasing power elevated, with the consequence that you're going to have an environmental problem, or shall we go green and don't believe for a moment that in the aggregate the green jobs are going to outweigh the brown jobs? Because every chance that industry has to technologically modernize, they shed labor. Unless you move to a product service system, unless you start paying people not to make a Nintendo game, but to teach your kid Chinese. That is, if you pay people to perform services which are not capital intensive and energy intensive, then you have enormous multiplier effect. The problem is General Motors doesn't own Chinese teachers, and they're not interested in promoting them. You know, the problem is we deal with stuff. Now, work is important not only in the economic sense, it creates purchasing power, but it provides a means of engagement in the society. You cannot leave the bulk of people without using their human capital. If 30% of our industrial plant was dormant because we couldn't sell the stuff, you would say, what a tragedy, what a waste of capital. And we're content to waste 70% of human capital, which is renewable. I mean, the reasons are simple. We don't sell human capital in the market. But you have to find a mechanism for elevating the role of labor. And I'm not talking about physical labor. I'm talking about the so-called knowledge-based work. I mean, any of you who make an airline reservation or try to get your computer fixed, you talk to somebody, it takes you hours and hours and hours to get the information you want. The price of services have been all externalized onto the consumer. We could pay human beings to give us intelligent answers to the questions which these guys from India and from China do not give us, okay? You have to integrate labor policy with industrial policy with trade policy, or it's not going to work, right? So here's the, and this is the last slide, here's the triangle. What does it involve? Well, we have these pollution problems, as I've indicated to you. They're connected to industrial production through three different pathways. Industrialization, the second, the role of investment, the third, trade and environment. They have differential effects on the environment. We also change the way we make things and where we make them. So the International Division of Labor and the nature, the changing nature of employment, what people do, affect all of those characteristics of work, which are really the only way to engage people in the society. Large amount of people who are not employed is not a sustainable society. The issue of having to do more in the labor area suggests that unless you change the way we make our changes, you are just basically going to increase the environmental footprint. And as I said, it turns out that every chance industry has to modernize and to shed labor, they will. The green jobs don't outweigh the brown jobs. It's wishful thinking that you're going to have either from global warming or from toxic pollution, any of that change. So let me stop here and just say that I think innovation is key, labor is key, markets are key in terms of control. You need to have a legal system which is enforced, a government that is dedicated, and those are the necessary and sufficient conditions. Technological fixes are not enough, incentives are not enough if you can't get the people who are stopping you out of the way. Thank you.